Safety Act. This morning, the Online Safety Act is finally here. It's a piece of legislation that manages at the same time to be both timid, not my words, that's what one of the articles, I think in The Guardian said, and draconian. That's that's the impression given by Maya Tousi. Incompetent, yet dangerously overreaching. And it's a legal contradiction, it's a massive legal contradiction, so vague and inconsistent that even civil servants enforcing it are going to be staring at their own guidelines and wondering, is this satire? Is this coherent? It's not coherent. I've had a look at it. It is incoherent twaddle. And Ofcom, the regulatory arm of Whitehall's control freakery, now holds extraordinary powers over social media platforms, video sharing sites and messaging services in the same way as it holds powers over what is it, reality TV. It didn't do any good with the reality TV. It's not going to do any good over online safety. The problem is the vagueness. The problem is, who is it trying to help? And the impression is it's helping the people. In fact, it's simply adding another lever of control to, it's adding oppression. It's adding oppression to the system. It's not really helping anybody because it's too vague to offer that help. So, this power that is now being given, the extraordinary powers over social media platforms, video sharing sites, messaging services. It can fine tech companies up to 10% of their global revenue, not just UK profits, but the entire global earnings, for failing to remove content that is not necessarily illegal, but that is judged it could be harmful. Well, what is harmful content? And the problem is that people have spent too much time in Parliament asking what is harmful and still not getting an answer. One idea is that anything that causes serious distress, that's it, that's the bar. If someone somewhere is psychologically distressed by a social media post, you, the content creator, might be committing an offence. Under Section 10 of the revised bill, this could mean prison time, up to 2 years, I think. You heard that right. You can now be sent to jail for causing distress with words. Maya Tousi did a video yesterday. I like Maya, by the way, rightly pointing out that Ofcom isn't even pretending to apply this law fairly. They're starting by targeting large channels and social media accounts with big followings, keeping a special list of those they plan to monitor. So it's not about fairness or safety, it's about control. The mainstream media, BBC, Channel 4, Sky News, will remain untouchable, even if they spread false information. Why? Because they have Ofcom-approved licenses. But independent creators, if they post a video, even by accident, that someone considers distressing, they can be fined or prosecuted. And this isn't about stopping terrorism or child exploitation. The Online Safety Act is a Trojan horse for government censorship, wrapped in the usual rhetoric of protecting the vulnerable. This law started as a way to target terrorist content and child exploitation, but as always, scope creep has turned it into something far bigger and far nastier. It now criminalises harmful but legal speech, a category so broad it could apply to almost anything. For example, if you criticise a religion, and Maya might, someone might claim that produces psychological harm. If you state biological facts, and some people might, that could cause someone distress. If you call a politician a liar, people might consider that is misleading. Under Section 10, the authorities don't even have to prove actual harm. If they believe you intended harm, if there's a substantial risk of someone being psychologically harmed, that's enough for a prosecution. And here's the kicker. Even private messaging services like WhatsApp aren't safe. The government wants access to encrypted messages under the guise of preventing child abuse, meaning end-to-end encryption is now under threat in Britain. This means they could force WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram to break their encryption, making private conversations subject to state scrutiny. It's mass surveillance by another name. And if a tech company fails to comply, they face this fine of 10% of their entire global revenue. This is unprecedented legal overreach. YouTube's parent company, Google, makes over $300 billion a year. A 10% fine could cost them $30 billion. Meta, that's Facebook, could face a fine of over $10 billion. Even Elon Musk's X could be targeted, and Musk has already threatened to pull X out of the UK if this nonsense continues. And it gets worse. A separate crime for transmitting false communications now exists, punishable by up to 51 weeks in prison. Jail time is now on the table for social media users, not just tech platforms. And meanwhile, Britain's real criminals, drug gangs, human traffickers, fraudsters, continue their business without concern. But if you tweet something distressing, you might find yourself in court. It would be remiss not to acknowledge the parade of incompetents who made this law possible. Nadine Dorries, who didn't understand what end-to-end encryption was, yet championed this bill. Michelle Donnellan, who claimed it was about holding big tech accountable while giving Ofcom unchecked power over independent media. Peter Kyle, the latest fool in charge, who thinks that he can regulate global free speech by threatening billion-dollar companies. He's simply picking up the detritus that has been scattered by previous office holders. This law is a Frankenstein's monster of political cowardice, an ill-conceived attempt to pander to activists while pretending to tackle online harms. It manages to be both Orwellian and incompetent, as only a British law seems able to manage that extraordinary ability to have one foot in one camp of incompetence and the other foot in the camp of draconian surveillance. And lest we forget, this started under the Conservatives, but Labour has made it worse. Keir Starmer's government has expanded Ofcom's powers, ensuring that it's not just tech platforms that suffer, but individual content creators as well. And what happens when the White House starts pushing back? J.D. Vance or Elon Musk, perhaps both wearing colourful socks, have already condemned this bill as an attack on free speech. Trump has even threatened tariffs on the UK if the law is enforced against American tech giants. So what will Starmer do? Probably nothing. He will let the bureaucracy churn forward because for him this is a win-win. Tech companies pay fines, independent creators live in fear, and Ofcom gets more power. Ofcom is another quango like the NHS, like NHS England, that needs to be curbed and possibly trimmed into non-existence, because it doesn't seem to do anything. And Ofcom needs to be set up again as two independent companies. One company to monitor and observe the media, and the other company to go after bits of the media that do harm. There might even be a third wing to a new version of Ofcom, which is there to protect people who are harmed. And in, for example, reality TV. That's not something, incidentally, that Ofcom does. There is nobody you can call. There's nobody you can write to protect you from reality TV. So the Online Safety Act is a disaster. It tries to be everything at once: an anti-fraud law, an anti-terrorism law, a child protection law, and a speech policing mechanism. In reality, it's none of these things. It's simply a tool for bureaucratic overreach, one that will suppress legitimate debate under the guise of psychological harm, one that will chill free speech by making people afraid to express opinions, and one that will give Ofcom ridiculous enforcement powers that will be selectively applied. What I find extraordinary about this is you can access online content from an online source outside the UK. So yes, there are the big content, the big giants like Facebook and YouTube and so on. But online, but creators based outside the UK, are they going to be fined, or are they going to be jailed for their content? I don't think that's a practical step, even if that's an intention. If there's one silver line, it's that British bureaucracy has proven hopelessly slow. And while Ofcom is scrambling to work out how to enforce this, how even to operate this, whether or not it has the staff to operate it. Well, I mean, it can always employ staff from NHS England. The big tech companies will fight back. Elon Musk, Google, and even YouTube are already challenging this law. But we shouldn't rely on billionaires to fight for our rights. This law needs serious reform or outright repeal. The Online Safety Act is the biggest attack on free speech in modern British history. It's vague, inconsistent, and the product of politicians who don't understand the internet and don't really understand the power of words. Worst of all, it will not make us safer. It will not make us safe. It will not work. All this law does is to give more power to bureaucrats, to give more power to control. And that cannot be good.